Welcome to the Zenergy Podcast. I'm your host, Karan, and today I'm joined by Dave Turk, former Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Energy. We dive into Dave's time at the DOE, where he helped shape some of the most ambitious clean energy policies in American history. Dave shares insights on daily leadership, building effective teams, and navigating complex challenges. We also explore H.R. 1, often called One Big Beautiful Bill, and the potential impact of Trump-era policy rollbacks. From U.S.-China energy dynamics to rare earth supply chain dependence, Dave offers a sharp perspective on what's ahead and what gives him hope. I hope you enjoy this episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And now, here's my conversation with Dave Turk. Dave, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It is a true privilege to have you on, and I'm excited to dive into a vast array of topics. As you know, there's so much happening in energy right now between policy debates in Congress, shifting market dynamics and global pressures. And as someone who helped lead the Department of Energy through such a pivotal period, really looking forward to your perspective on where things stand and where we go from here. So to kick things off, would love to start with the fact that since you helped lead the design and rollout of some of the most ambitious clean energy policies in US history, and that's honestly not a hyperbole, and now just a couple years later, many of those pillars now face real threats. So I'd love to get your perspective on how you think the current rollback efforts, especially in the Senate, are going to play out, and then as well as what it's like to watch this unfold from the outside after being in the thick of it.
Well, first of all, Karan, thank you for having me on your podcast, and thank you for doing the podcast and all that you're doing. And I want to thank all the listeners here as well. The more people are engaged, the more people are aware of what's going on, and the more people decide to make careers in the clean energy and climate space. That's how we make real progress. And so thank you for your choices, and thank you for doing this podcast. And it's just a pleasure to be here with your listeners. I don't think it's hyperbole what you said about the impact that we had over the last 4 years and the congressional pieces of legislation that were passed and the execution. This was such an important 4-year period of time. The scale of the legislation that was passed and the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure legislation was just enormous. The tax cuts, the $100 billion just in our department, the Department of Energy, and grants, loans, hugely, hugely impactful as well. So what I think that underscores to me is what's going on in Congress right now in terms of the reconciliation package that the Republicans have now passed through the House, and now it's being deliberated on with the Senate. What that bill would do is basically be a death knell to large swaths of what progress we were able to make over the last 4 years, and certainly when it comes to the tax credit side of things. So what we're talking about is literally hundreds of thousands of jobs all across communities. We talked a lot about 950 new and expanded clean energy manufacturing facilities all over the country. I had a chance to travel and do some ribbon cuttings for a lot of those facilities over the last year and a half. Those are major employers in counties and cities all across the country. Many of those won't actually come to fruition if the House bill is what ends up passing. Now, the Senate will do hopefully what the Senate does and make sure that this package is much more nuanced, much more thoughtful, and much more targeted in terms of what they do, as opposed to right now, which is basically a gutting of those tax incentives and effective gutting. So it's jobs in communities all across the country. The other part, which I think is going to resonate, hopefully, with senators, and I know will resonate with voters if for some reason the House version is passed, is affordability. Getting rid of all those tax credits that make it cheaper and quicker for us to bring on electrons, clean electrons, all across the country is going to have a huge upward pressure on prices all across the country. I've seen estimates that average consumers, average households will pay $400 more if the Inflation Reduction Act tax incentives are gutted. And that's not even talking about the loans and the grants that also reduce prices. So if anybody's interested, and every elected politician should be interested in reducing prices for consumers, that was a big lesson learned from the previous election. We shouldn't be rescinding these tax incentives. We should be leaning in even more to make energy more affordable for more Americans all across the country. It's also a blow, it's a gut punch to competitiveness. Many of these tax incentives, many of these grants, many of these loans are aimed at developing our own clean energy supply chains here in our country and working with allies around the world, as opposed to all those clean energy supply chains, all those energy supply chains being dominated by one country. There is not a way we're going to build up that clean energy supply unless we have incentives, unless we have policy that encourages that all across the country. And so competitiveness will be hurt, including for AI. We need to build AI in our country. We need those data centers in our country, economic reasons, national security reasons. And those tax incentives are absolutely critical to having cheap, affordable, and quick power come onto our grids. And then lastly, for those listeners, and I suspect there's a lot of them on this podcast, this is a real gut punch to climate. The Inflation Reduction Act was literally the biggest piece of climate legislation ever passed, not just in the history of the United States, but in the history of the world. And so you can appreciate and understand if you effectively gut it, what implications that's going to have on not only the US's ability to get our emissions in check, but also to leverage and work with other countries around the world for them to reduce their emissions. So there's a huge, huge amount at stake, and I hope people appreciate that and are weighing in with their senators to do the right thing.
Which is actually a question I was going to ask you. What do you feel people can do in this current moment? And based on what you said, the affordability impacts, the competitiveness impacts, and um, the job impacts, do you feel hopeful that the Senate will act? Have you had conversations with senators regarding this? And like, what is your overarching sense on? I mean, of course, it's still early. It sort of just got to the Senate. But if you could provide some insight on that front, if you uh, have had conversations, would love to get your perspective there.
Well, I've been having a lot of conversations. I worked in the Senate 6 years earlier in my career and had a chance to work directly with a lot of key senators on both sides of the aisle and a lot of staff and others who can be influential on the debate happening in the Senate. And I think first and foremost, what everybody needs to do, whether you're just a citizen out there in whatever state you're in, or if you're with a company or others, community that's being impacted or potentially impacted by what the Senate's going to be debating, first and foremost is get to know what's really at stake, right? There is certainly efforts underfoot to pass along bad information, misinformation that this isn't that big of a deal, nothing to see here, et cetera, et cetera. And I know there's a lot of other things as part of what President Trump calls the big beautiful bill. There's the Medicaid stuff. There's important issues across the board, our national debt, right? We need to be getting our fiscal house in order. There's so many provisions in this one bill. My hope is that people educate themselves about what's at stake for energy, what's at stake for affordability, what's at stake for competitiveness, what's at stake for climate. And then secondly, everybody needs to make their voices heard. One of the most disturbing things so far in this administration, President Trump's second administration, is how people feel cautious and people feel nervous about making their voices heard about issues that are important to them. That's completely un-American. We all need to make our voices. We all need to feel empowered. We all need to feel like we can speak up. If you're a company that's going to be impacted by these tax incentives going away, speak up. Let your senators know. Let your representatives know. Let your mayors know and governors know, right? Senators pay a lot of attention to mayors and governors. They pay a lot of attention to companies in their districts, investors in their districts, potential future investors, and what this means in terms of future jobs and for future projects coming into particular states. So everybody needs to make their voices heard about what's at stake, and let's make sure those senators have a full appreciation of what this means if they vote with the House and gut all these incentives, gut all these opportunities, economic opportunities, these great jobs all across the country. My hope, and having gotten to know a lot of these senators that I respect a lot, my hope is the Senate will be quite a bit different than the House. The House is a different institution. The pressure on the House was immense, even for representatives, Republican representatives who were supporting of some of these tax incentives. They got steamrolled. I don't think senators, by nature of them being senators, and the particular senators we're talking about, will want to get steamrolled. And so I think there is more opportunity, there is more hope, there is more optimism, but we all have agency. This is not a play we know what the conclusion is. This is democracy live and in action. And so it is unknown whether we're going to salvage some of these incredibly important provisions. Senator Curtis, who's the new senator from Utah, has an op-ed as we're talking here today, and maybe it's a few days old once this gets out there to our podcast listeners, but incredibly eloquent about what's at stake here. And I know there's a lot of senators who feel that way on both sides of the aisle.
I was actually just reading that a little bit before our conversation kicked off, and as you mentioned, it was great to see and seemed relatively balanced and nuanced in the op-ed perspective. So, given the scale of these investments and all of these potential extremely positive impacts, some of which we've already seen manifest on the ground. A question that I've heard people ask and would love to get your sense on as someone who, like in the center of deploying a lot of this massive investment and went to ribbon cutting ceremonies across the US, got to speak to companies on the ground, people on the ground. Given the scale, do you feel like the on the ground impacts were felt at the level of funding? As in, why do you feel like we're in this position where there is so much like possibility of a lot of this overturning if the impact, which a lot of it is really fresh and new, but would love to just get your on the ground take of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as someone who's had a chance to work in the executive branch, but also in the Congress previously, as well, I think you have to differentiate politics from substance in the real world, if you want to think of it that way. There is certainly politics being played here, right? Characterizing what was done in the previous administration in certain disparaging kinds of ways. Um, Maybe it resonates politically with some folks, but I think what we need to do is get beyond the politics and really get to the substance and what's really at stake here in the real world and real communities and real people's lives. I come from a small town in Illinois in the Midwest, and I like to think about my friends that I grew up with and others who are still living in that small town in that area. Where the rubber hits the road, they care about jobs, they care about the future of their communities, employers that are going to be there not just for a year or two, but with a real opportunity and upside going forward along those lines. The numbers, when you look at the substance, is incredibly compelling. And I know there's always going to be politics there, and we'll have to have a debate, and we'll have to have a back and forth and elections, of course. But my hope is the senators, they've got 6-year terms. They need to be thinking about not only their states, but what's good for the country and the competitiveness of our country. I hope they really look at the substance and think about the substance. It came through, just as you said in Senator Curtis's op-ed, I think, incredibly well. It came through when Senator Murkowski from Alaska, with 3 other colleagues, including Curtis, but 2 other senators, wrote a letter laying out what's at stake here in terms of really being thoughtful about repealing tax incentives and creating an environment of uncertainty for investors and developers. People want to put the money in the U.S. People want to put their money in communities all across the country, but they're not going to do so if there's this uncertainty and if tax incentives are repealed in the kind of way that's contemplated within the House bill. So my hope is when senators, when others look at what's at stake here, they really focus on the substance of it. Let's not get distracted with a label that President Trump might attach to, what was done previously. Let's look at the substance and look at the merits of what this provision or that provision or this grant program or this loan program. And if there's some that the prevailing numbers don't support, great. But look at the substance of that. And if there's some that make a lot of sense, then let's keep them in there and let's build on that and let's go forward and let's not let labels and politics get in the way of retaining something that has been hugely impactful and can be hugely impactful going forward. So that's my hope is the Senate really focuses on the substance. And for a whole number of reasons, the Senate has the ability sometimes to do that a lot more than the House does.
Thank you. Thank you for shedding all of this insight. Really, really appreciated it. Now shifting gears slightly, uh, as you noted before this interview, I have the man in the arena quote above me, and in many ways, you embody this quote. And I'm not saying that to suck up. Genuinely, like you were in the arena, and I truly respect that. Given that you were in a role at such a transformative moment, managing, I assume, like so many people, and would love to peel back the layers of what operating in a role like that actually entails. So, could you talk about what the day to day actually look like as deputy secretary, managing such a sprawling, vast, high stakes portfolio?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the compliment. I love the quote. That's one of my favorite quotes out there. And Teddy Roosevelt more generally is great for quotes, but I think that's a particularly important quote. And for those who've not had a chance to look at it, I'm sure folks can look it up. And my hope is more and more people throughout their careers decide that they want to be in the arena, that they want to put themselves out there, including running for political office. I've talked to and had a chance to go to a bunch of universities recently, and now I'm affiliated with Columbia University and their Global Energy Center. And I'm just inspired that a lot of people are willing to put themselves out in the arena. I wish more people would run for office. I know it's a tough thing to do to run for political office these days. And you get a lot of people who maybe shouldn't be running for political office who are successful, but we need people who are in it for the right reason, putting themselves out there so that they can make the world a better place. So thank you for the compliment first and foremost. All right. So what was it like working in the Department of Energy these last 4 years? It was a lot of work. We did an awful lot. It's a big department. Our annual budget, at least when we were there, was about $50 billion a year, about 115,000 people if you add in all the contractors and lab workers. So it's a pretty big apparatus. And I found myself doing a lot of a lot, as you might imagine, as the number two in the department. But I think the things I feel most proud about is one, you can't do anything in government or any organization unless you have a talented, motivated team. And so we spent a lot of time with our team, picking the right people, empowering the right people, making sure that if we did a bad decision, if we made a bad decision on personnel, that we would fix it. And we would have the right kind of leadership and the right kind of empowerment and people feeling like they were part of something bigger than themselves and motivated and really leaning in to take full opportunity of any grant money or loan money or other kinds of tools in the tool belt that we had. So the personnel piece was incredibly, incredibly important. And then a lot of my day to day, I have to say, was plumbing. Not plumbing in terms of fixing the toilets and whatnot at the Forstall building where the Department of Energy is headquartered, but plumbing in the sense of unleashing this top talent and making sure that they could be successful. So I spent a lot of time with White House colleagues, with colleagues from the Interior Department, colleagues from different departments, colleagues in the Senate and the House to make sure that our team could be successful with the tools that they've been given and to try to get them more tools and more support so that they could be even more impactful going forward. And that just was a lot of problem solving. It was a lot of working with others. It was a lot of problem solving. It was a lot of trying to connect dots and make sure that people were connected with folks that they needed to be connected with. And a lot of connecting with the private sector and investors and those who are making things happen in the real world, quote unquote. And the federal government's job, I think, is not to do it ourselves. It's to use the tools to empower those who are in the private sector in organizations all across the country to be incredibly successful. And for us to do that, we need to have some humility. We need to listen to folks, and we need to do that plumbing day in and day out to make government work as efficiently as it possibly can be. So it was an incredible honor and privilege. Secretary Granholm, who was our Department of Energy secretary, was just so inspirational and so phenomenal and such a decent human being. to work with and work for. And we had such a great team there. It's one of the reasons that I get so upset at seeing so many talented folks be fired and or be pressured out of the Department of Energy. We've lost so much talent. About a third of the staff so far, the federal employees, have either been fired and or forced to leave, which you're not going to get anything done unless you have a team and you have a talented team. So that's been super, super disappointing so far.
100%. Yeah, I'm forever grateful for my time at the DOE, for you, and also for Secretary Granholm. I uh, while I was at the DOE organized the Global Clean Energy Action Forum, and because I was young in my career at the time, was selected to be the youth U.S. delegate for the Global Clean Energy Action Forum, and Secretary Granholm was scheduled to throw the first pitch for this event, but she really didn't want to. So she was like, "Let's delegate it. Who's our youth delegate?" So that I get a call, and they're like, "Karan, when's the last time you've thrown a baseball?" I was like, "What?" I haven't thrown a baseball in a while, but I threw a football relatively. They're like, "All right, well, get out there." So I got to throw the first pitch. That was definitely. I think I peaked. I think I peaked in that moment.
I was so fortunate to work with Secretary Granholm as their number two and really try to figure out what I could do plugging in any way that I could help the overall effort. We had two phenomenal chiefs of staff during my time, Tarek Shaw and then Christopher Davis as well. And again, such a great team, front office team, such a great team more generally. So I was really trying to figure out where there was comparative advantage and value add to be had. The deputy, along with the chief of staff, really helps play that chief operating officer role and really trying to make sure the department is functioning, the personnel pieces, the budget piece, all of those kinds of things that you need to do when you're managing any organization, and certainly an organization of that size. I did a lot of work with the White House and the interagency to try to make sure that everything that we were doing was as impactful as it possibly could be when there were challenges with White House colleagues to diffuse and to make sure that we were all going forward in that kind of way. And then I did a lot of work with the private sector and others outside of government to make sure that we were listening to that impact input, to make adjustments as we needed to make adjustments, and again, to be impactful. You don't make impact unless you're working with real world partners like companies, like investors, like organizations all across the country. So I spent a lot of time not only in Washington meeting with folks, but did a good bit of travel, as the secretary did, rightfully so, and others in our department, so that we can make sure that when we had tools, we were doing them impactfully. So it was a bit of a jack of all trades, do everything, do some speechifying from time to time as well, some traveling domestically and internationally. But it was a tough job, but incredibly, incredibly rewarding, and I really miss it.
Were there any leadership takeaways that have come to mind in your in the months since you stopped? Because it's probably just like all hands on deck in the moment, so it might be sometimes hard to reflect. But since you've been out of office, does anything specifically resonate from a leadership perspective? And do you have
Yeah,
any advice for future deputy secretaries?
yeah, absolutely. So maybe a few thoughts on, lessons learned that I picked up. One, this is something I knew going into this job, but was really reinforced. And personnel, personnel, personnel. If you don't have the right people in the right jobs with the mentality to be team players, you're just not going to get things done. If you have showboats who are looking at just getting credit on your team and not willing to support others, you're just not going to be impactful. You're not going to have that kind of team approach that actually achieves real world results. So, I think if you're a leader in an organization, you can't spend too much time on the personnel side of things, both to pick the right people and the right jobs from the get-go, but also if there are challenges, deal with those challenges and don't let them just fester out there. So that's really one incredibly, incredibly important lesson learned on the leadership side of things.
Did you have to recruit people
So
really
we
like hard on that
Well, I tell
initially?
you, like, and this is something I worry about. Both the secretary and I and others, our chief of staff and others spend a lot of time recruiting top talent. not only in terms of political appointees, right? Each agency has its kind of cadre of political appointees, but the vast majority of people who work for the federal government are civil service employees. And these are people, especially the talented folks, who could probably earn twice as much, three times as much in the private sector out there. And we made the pitch be part of something special. We've got all this money that taxpayers, citizens voted for with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the grants, with the loans. Let's make impact from that. Let's do something good for the real world. So we were able to recruit, as part of what we called our Clean Energy Core, 1,000+ people, phenomenal talent with such terrific expertise to come in. And unfortunately, now many of those are the people who were let go as probationary employees because they'd only been there for a year or two. And others who are super competent and can find jobs in the private sector when the fork in the road was offered, especially the second time around. A lot of those folks just had had enough with some of the dysfunction and challenges that are going on right now, and they decided to take that fork. So the government's losing huge talent right now, which is unfortunate, and I think makes it more difficult when there is a new administration a few years from now to recruit that talent back in or to recruit that next generation of talent. But my hope is, like Teddy Roosevelt's quote, like JFK, like others, there is a real call and a real desire for people to serve their government and to do something better than just earning a paycheck. And so my hope is that that will still be inspiring and we'll be able to have the kind of talent that the U.S. government deserves.
Makes a lot of sense. Maybe one or two more quick leadership lessons, and then I have like two or three policy focused questions that I would love to get your take on, as I know we're coming, this conversation just literally flew by.
No, that sounds great. That sounds great. So maybe one other thing to share on the leadership side, and I think this is leadership, maybe two things. One is, I think if you're a leader, you should really think of yourself not in a top-down kind of way that you know everything and all you need to do is send the right signals to the team and everyone's going to execute on it. What I found the success, certainly in a department that was as well functioning and well led with Secretary Granholm, is even though I was the deputy secretary, a lot of times I felt like I was working for the assistant secretaries or the directors or the point people who are running their programs and trying to make their programs that impactful. And it was really trying to empower them, but then support them so that they could have impact. So instead of them having to bang their heads on the wall for 2 months, 5 months with interagency partners, if I could make a quick call to the deputy secretary or others at another department and we could streamline that and get things done quickly. People want things to be done quickly and want things to be done effectively. And so, at least in the department, I felt like there was an ability to streamline, to help, to again do that plumbing, just to make things work the way that the American citizens and taxpayers should want and demand it to work. A second part that I think is super important, and I wrote about this on my LinkedIn social media post not too long ago, about not wanting to work with assholes. Not to be an asshole if you're a leader and a manager, but to demand any organization that you're a part of have a culture that supports each other. I'm not talking kumbaya and people being afraid to say anything to others that need criticism and need constructive criticism. There's a way to do that that's respectful. There's a way to do that that helps support people in their careers. But I firmly believe that you should demand not to work for assholes and you shouldn't be an asshole yourself. There's ways to deal with things constructively, to take things on head on when there are issues and there are challenges. But I think that's a incredibly important part is to have that kind of culture of openness, that culture of honest criticism, and that culture of feedback and being open to that feedback. One of the most difficult things that I found was to get good, candid feedback from folks so that we could make adjustments and make improvements along the way. But I think that's incredibly important to have that bottom-up feedback so that we can actually make the changes we need to make.
Really appreciate you sharing. And another important part of your role, as you briefly mentioned, was engaging internationally. Um, and today, Trump and Xi just had a call on rare earths, which, as you know, are a very key piece of any clean energy boom that we hope to see here in the US. So, as someone who engaged on this front at the international level, are there any lessons that you learned on how you feel the US should approach China's role in the current global energy system? And also, part B to this question, is it realistic, do you feel, to scale a clean energy boom without China at this point, given our current reliance on materials like rare earths, solar components, and batteries?
Yeah, there is absolutely no doubt for anyone who's looked into the numbers that China dominates many parts of the clean energy supply chain, including with rare earths and critical minerals. And it's the mining piece of it, but it's less the mining part, and it's really the processing of those critical minerals, the processing of those rare earths, that the vast majority, depending on the particular critical mineral, happens in China. I don't think that's good for us in the US. I don't think that's good for other countries and companies all around the world. Diversified supply chains is something that I think is helpful for not only the US, it's helpful for the UK, it's helpful for developing countries to get the most out of the minerals that they have in the ground themselves. So I think there's a lot on the line, a lot of importance behind diversifying those supply chains. One of the pieces that's so frustrating to me, I mentioned it at the outset, with what's at stake with reconciliation and what's going on in Congress right now, is with the tools that were given to us, with the tools that were enacted, the loans, the grants, the tax incentives, we were actually making significant progress in diversifying our supply chains. So, for instance, with lithium, we were on track to 2030 to have 2,100% more lithium processed, produced in the United States, thanks to the combination of the tax incentives, the grants, the loans, all the tools that we were working on together. My fear is once you get rid of all those tools, we're going to take a step back, or maybe two or three steps back in terms of diversifying supply chains with what we're doing domestically. And sometimes it takes a little bit of government help on the front end to pay those capital costs, to help on those capital costs so that we actually have whole new industries here in the United States. The other part that I think is quite disturbing with this administration is their relationship with Canada, with Europe, with others around the world who should be Australia, who should be natural allies for us and common interest in diversifying supply chains. And so it's not just the rhetoric, it's treating some of our longest standing allies in a way that is more transactional, in a way that's not core interests, in a way that's not a shared partnership for the long haul going forward. And Canada, Australia, Japan, Korea, developing countries, India, all around the world should be natural allies in diversifying our supply chains. Good for them, good for us. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum universe the way President Trump seems to approach folks. And so we're doing the kinds of things to really set back these partnerships, these relationships that are in the United States' interests. They're incredibly good for us, for American citizens, for cost, for diversifying supply chains, and that's being put at risk right now.
How long, this might be hard to answer, but roughly, if you were to guess, how long would it take for the US to be in a position where it doesn't require China to be a part of the supply chains for example, like solar and batteries and other key clean energy systems?
So we did a lot of analysis on this, including our series of liftoff reports, looking sector by sector about what was necessary to get a diversification, to get a homegrown economic opportunities, jobs for a variety of sectors here in the United States, but working with allies. And so there's a lot of detailed, rigorous analysis looking at hydrogen, looking at geothermal, looking at a whole range of really exciting technologies in ways that are very rigorous and very granular and very actionable along those lines. It really depends. The question of how long for particular sectors depends on what your range of tools in the tool belt are. If we're going to be taking tax incentives off the table, if we're going to slow down our loan program, if we're going to start rescinding grants, if we sacrifice the talent in the U.S. government to be able to execute on any of the tools that are given them, we're going to slow things down. We're going to slow things down to the point where we may actually go backwards. We may actually cede even more economic opportunity and diversification of supply chains. So I think we had some incredibly important, powerful momentum. It's not easy. I think there needs to be some discipline, looking sector by sector, figuring out where it makes sense to really fight and where it makes sense to build up that manufacturing base and where it makes sense, cost effective sense to build it up in the United States versus working with India versus working with Canada versus working with Australia, working with other partners around the world. So there's a rigor, there's a discipline to it, but we were making some real progress. And right now it feels like we're moving, despite the rhetoric, we're actually moving in the opposite direction. And I hope that's appreciated and realized. And again, I hope our senators stand strong and make sure that we are doing the right thing by competition and diversifying supply chains.
Final question, and I know we're already a few minutes over. Really grateful for your time. If you had to write a one-page memo to the current administration, what are your top three recommendations for ensuring U.S. energy leadership over the next decade? And then I just have to end with asking what gives you optimism right now, if anything?
All right, so we'll end on the optimism piece, but first answer your question about the one-page memo. And I did have a chance to, as I think it's appropriate, to interact with the new Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, when he came in during the transition, and have made myself available to my successor, who's coming in the Deputy Secretary position, and others as well. First and foremost, it's personnel. If you don't have the team in place, if you don't have a good trust between political appointees and civil servants, if you don't have the numbers, if you don't have the quality of those civil servants in place, you're just not going to be successful. And I have to say, the whole Doge experiment, the way they went about firing people, the way this administration went about encouraging others to leave, I think it was exactly the opposite of what you should have done. They didn't go after any folks who weren't doing their jobs as well as they should have done. There are folks, it's a big bureaucracy, a big department all across the government. There are people who aren't earning what they're getting from taxpayers. They didn't target those folks at all. What they did is they targeted the folks who have ambition, the folks who just joined the government, the folks who were promoted to a new job. All of those people were let go in the probationary employee firings. So you didn't deal with any challenging HR issues. What you dealt with is the easy ones that you could fire because they'd only been there a year or two and didn't have the same protections. And many times, those were your stars. Those were your people who were your go-getters. And then with these forks in the road, where they basically go in and they say, hey, we'll pay you for another 8 months, 6 months. How does that make sense for taxpayers to just pay people for not working? But if you take that, what they told a lot of managers was, at least what I've heard, and this is secondhand coming from a lot of folks that I still know in the department, is if you don't take this fork in the road, we've got to meet this arbitrary number of shrinking our staff by a third or a fourth or whatever the actual number is. No one knows what the number is or the transparency that they have associated with these things. If you don't take the fork in the road, we're going to have to fire someone from your team. And so what a lot of these managers did is say, I've had my chance to serve my country. I don't want to, I want to be a team player and let someone else do that. And so we lost amazing, amazing human talent. So I can't think of a personnel system that was worse designed to actually retain and incent top talent to come onto your team and to get rid of any dead weight. But that'd be the first thing is personnel, personnel, personnel. And that's the most important, and everything else depends on that. Secondly, and this should be obvious from the previous election, but more generally, people want affordable energy. They want energy prices going down, not going up. And again, this is where I get frustrated in that if you're going to repeal these tax incentives and do the other things, the grants, the loans, really impinge on their ability to do good work for the American people. That's upward price pressure and upward price. So to me, really keeping the eye on affordability. We spent a lot of time working on affordability, despite COVID, despite Russia's invasion of Ukraine and some of the inflationary pressures. We spent a lot of time really focusing on that and making sure that we had that downward pressure on prices. And then I guess the third piece, maybe specific to the Department of Energy, is revel in the nerddom. As you know from your time having spent there, we got such a phenomenal group of folks, including and maybe especially in our national labs, who really know stuff. Like they're nerds in the best sense of the word. They know issues, they know technologies. Listen to them, learn from them. Make sure that you're spending time with some humility and appreciating that as smart as you might think you are, there's people who know a lot more than you do, technically, substantively. Listen to them, try to help guide that, try to help be a channel for that, having a voice so that you can make better decisions on behalf of the entire department. So have that kind of sense of humility. And then what makes me optimistic? All right, so let me say this very directly and clearly. I am optimistic. I think we can, as humanity, and certainly the United States needs to be leading, not just in the federal government, but state governments, local governments, the private sector. We need to lead if we're going to be successful on a challenge like global climate change, other challenges that our country and our world faces. What makes me optimistic fundamentally is the type of talent that we had at the Department of Energy, the type of talent, unfortunately, that we're losing at the Department of Energy. We need folks to be engaged. We need to folks, as Teddy Roosevelt said, to be the man, the person in the arena, to step up, to be part of the solution, to want to do something with their career above and beyond just earning a paycheck and taking care of their family, as important as that is. And I see that time and time again with even folks who were let go or fired from the department, doubling down, tripling down on doing good things with their career, and a whole new group of folks. It's graduation season right now, just seeing new talent wanting to make a career and really wanting to make an impact in the world. And that's inspirational. But we need more and more people to be part of this effort. And so I think we all need to inspire and try to help each other out.
Thank you so much, Dave, for joining the podcast, for sharing all this inspiring content. I really, really have enjoyed speaking with you. I've learned a lot through this conversation and grateful that you put yourself in the arena. We all are. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Karan. Really appreciate it. And thanks again for all that you do.
Thanks so much for checking out the Zenergy Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and subscribe to the podcast. It would mean so much to me and the rest of the team. We release episodes every Thursday, so stay tuned for all new episodes featuring industry leaders building a cleaner, greener future for us all. See you next time.